Welcome to Let's Get Vulnerable. I'm your host, Dr. Morgan. Today, the long awaited breakdown of Love is Blind Season 9. There is so much to talk about with this season. And in particular, you all know this about me. I do not see this as purely entertainment. If you are wanting the entertainment aspect, please, there are a million other podcasts that are talking about all the gossip and the controversy, blah, blah, blah. I like to look at Love is Blind and other dating shows as education. What can we learn from these shows about relationships, attachment style dynamics? So, yes, we will talk about the controversy, but we're also going to give you attachment style dynamic breakdowns that you can then apply to your own dating life. I'm so excited to get into this 2-part series. We're going to be talking about every single couple and what we can learn from each of them. And boy, do we have a lot to unpack. Okay. In today's episode, I'm going to focus on Jordan and Megan. We're going to talk about that, including Megan's big announcement at the reunion. We're going to talk about Joe and Madison, one of my favorite couples to break down. This is a classic attachment style dynamic. And then we'll also get into Nick and Annie. So on Wednesday's episode, you can look forward to Edmund and Calabria. We'll be talking about Casey and Patrick. And then we'll also talk about Allie and Anton. So we're going to cover all the couples. I know you're going to get so much out of this. Whether you watch Love is Blind or not, you're still going to learn from these episodes. I'm so excited to dive in. And I just want to remind you, in case you did not know, in case you're new to the show, if you are wanting to work with me and you're wanting to become securely attached, this is your last chance. The Empowered, Secure, Loved Relationship Program is closing down at the end of the year. And my goodness, the spots are filling so quickly. This is a high touch, high support coaching experience where we take you from whatever attachment style you currently have and help you embody secure attachment. So you become the securely attached version of you. This is deep inner work of releasing past relational trauma, learning emotional regulation, how to embody secure attachment, building your securely attached identity, learning healthy dating skills and secure communication, etc. This is everything you need so you can get off the dating roller coaster and attract your person. Okay. So this is your last chance. Applications are closing. Do not wait. I feel like November just has that energy of let's reclaim our highest and best selves. Let's move into the identity that we want for 2026. I don't know about you all, but 2025 has been quite the year. Okay. And I hear this from so many people. I think it's a collective consciousness of people going, I need 2026 to be really different. This is your invitation. And I don't talk about this often, but I think you should know doing this work of rewiring your brain, becoming the emotionally regulated, securely attached version of you. This is not just about your relationships. This is also about your health, your career, your family relationships, your ability to connect with friends and build meaningful friendships. Honestly, being able to easily attract your romantic partner and build your dream romantic relationship, that is a beautiful side effect of this work, but there is so much more, so much more. So I want you to know you're so deserving of healing, and it literally takes 5 minutes to apply to the program. Go use the link in the show notes and apply now before you wish that you had, because I'm not kidding around here. This is your last opportunity. Okay. Go apply. All right. Let's get into this episode. Let's do it. We are going to start out with Jordan and Sparkle Meg. Okay. Here's what happened with Jordan and Meg. So what we saw was two people connecting deeply in the pods, emotional vulnerability, a lot of creating emotional safety. I think we saw Meg open herself up to feeling emotionally safe and asking for whatever she needed in order to feel emotionally safe. And I think she was creating some of that safety with Jordan in real time. And then her other match, Mike, who was quote unquote her type and had that lifestyle compatibility, right? Because Meg is the one who she's very affluent. She has a ton of options. Her lifestyle is very, oh, I can just fly to Paris, or, hey, she's looking at $1 million homes to purchase. Jordan, single dad, working a 9 to 5, very solid middle class person. Okay. Very different lifestyle, a lot of routine, a lot of structure. He's also a parent. It requires structure, right? And then we have Meg, who has this totally free lifestyle. But these two people, they're in the pods, they fall in love, they're creating this emotional safety, and then they get out into the real world. And I think this is where the compatibility piece starts to clash. And I have some thoughts about this. I wonder what you all think about this. So I think number one, Meg made the mistake of thinking that she had to date outside of her compatibility type in order to create secure attachment. She associated Jordan with emotional safety, and she wrongly associated his, I guess you could say, social economic status, where he is in life. She associated that with emotional safety. And here's the deal. I honestly, I have so much compassion for Meg. I have so much compassion for Jordan. This is real world stuff. This is real world stuff that comes up. If I'm Meg, I think a really, really healthy growth point would be, look, I can create secure attachment with someone who is securely attached, regardless of their social economic status. Okay. And then what I would have liked from Meg was real honesty and reflection way earlier on about, what do you really want? Compatibility is that place where we get to be selfish. We get to ask ourselves, what do I really want in a partner? What do I want my life to look like? Lifestyle compatibility. Okay. And if Meg had been very honest with herself earlier on and realized that, oh, someone in my same social economic status that has the freedom, that's what it's more about. It's not about money, it's about freedom, that has the freedom that I do. That's really important to me. If she had been honest about that, then I think a lot of pain could have been avoided. Here's what I know, and I will say this over and over and over and over and over again until people start to get it. When you don't have secure attachment, I would say Meg was secure, leaning anxious. Okay. When you don't have secure attachment, then you're dating from a place of, oh, I just want to create secure attachment. That's my priority. And then what happens is, let's say you meet somebody like Jordan who is emotionally available, giving you reassurance, showing up secure. You create this secure attachment and you're going, that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. Right. But then you're like, oh shit, what about compatibility? This is when dating gets really freaking hard. Okay. Ask me how I know. I used to do this. When you are dating in a securely attached way, you have secure attachment as the foundation, then you can go into dating already first considering compatibility. We're going into dating being really curious about, do our lifestyles align? Do our values align? Are we going in the same direction? Is this the kind of life that I want? Can we co-create the kind of life that I want? Right? This was Meg's problem. She had clearly trauma from her past that she hadn't gotten rid of. So as she's dating, she's seeking for that, ooh, I just want to be chosen. I just want to have that emotional safety. And I think it caused her to put aside the compatibility pieces that were important to her. And then what happened? She became very emotionally safe with Jordan, and the compatibility concerns became clear to her. And she did the thing that Jordan was afraid that she would do, and she left him. So in an alternate world, how could have this played out? I think if Meg had realized that, oh, I actually don't need a partner that is as free as me or that has as flexible of a schedule as me. And all that's important to me is that, hey, my partner is growing. My partner is working on themselves. My partner is able to show up for me, right? Then maybe they could have worked out. And I think in this alternate reality, which by the way, I know is just like a false alternate reality, okay, where Jordan and Meg work out, here's what would have had to happen. Meg would have had to be very, very clear about what her non negotiables were with Jordan, what she needed to create that feeling of, okay, we're on the same page, we're building something meaningful together. So, absolute clarity on what that looks like. I could have seen maybe Jordan's doing the stay at home dad stuff and he's supporting Meg and he's helping her go on to build her next, $1 million idea. Like, there's a world where it could have worked. Okay. I really believe that. However, everyone gets to have their values. They get to have the things that matter to them. And for Meg, this experience taught her so much. And then if you watch the reunion, you know what happened. Like, I think, okay, I could be wrong on this timeline. I want to say, was it a couple months? It couldn't have been a couple weeks. Somebody has to DM me. Just clarify. How long was it? It was not that long. She goes through the breakup with Jordan. She goes on a couple dates with Mike. Turns out they're not compatible. She's glad that actually, I don't think it wasn't that they were compatible. I think she couldn't build secure attachment with him. So that was off the table. And then she meets her now partner. And I think it's a couple months later, and she was pregnant with a baby within a couple of months of being in this new relationship. And I can tell you that this comes from someone who got super clear on what she wanted, who realized she needed secure attachment and compatibility. And what happened? She went out and she created it and she had a baby. And it's a beautiful baby. And I think if anything, this example, can this please just give you some hope? If you're really stuck and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just dating these people that I'm not compatible with, I'm dating these people where it never works out. Sometimes we have to go through that process of it, quote unquote, not working out so that we get crystal clear on what matters to us. And that in our next relationship, we intentionally build the life that we want with someone because we now know what we don't want. Use Meg's story as that example of sometimes when we're dating, it's learning about what we don't want and also what's really important to us. And we can move on and remind yourself because you exist, someone who has your heart, your desire for partnership, the values that are important to you because you exist. There is a partner out there that also exists that wants the things that you want. And in my belief, there's an abundance of people that you could date. I don't believe in the oh my gosh, you have one soulmate. I believe you go out and you intentionally create a soulmate relationship with someone that you are securely attached with and also compatible with. Okay. So there's so much to learn here. And we talked a lot about Meg. What about Jordan? What does Jordan have to learn from this? Jordan, I think, if we're really honest here, he wanted to be chosen. I do think he showed up securely attached, but I think that deep down, he knew that the lifestyles weren't compatible and he was letting Meg tell him otherwise. He was letting Meg say things like, "Oh, I'm choosing you because it never worked out with those rich business guys. It just never worked out with those people. So I'm choosing you and we're doing it different." He listened to that even though in his gut, he knew that they weren't compatible. And I have to give props to him, freaking chicken breast with a crystal light packet on national TV. I mean, good Lord. Either he did that because he knew it would get attention, or he is just embracing his authentic self. My goodness. I think he stayed true to who he was. You know, he said, "Hey, I'm simple. I have a simple life. I don't need a lot. I don't want a lot. I prioritize taking care of my son." That was something that was very evident. He prioritized taking care of his son, and he's a good dad. So, shout out to Jordan for that, for staying true to who he is. And my hope is that through this process, he did not devalue himself. He has so much to give. Clearly, I think he's emotionally available. He wants partnership. And I think, what did he learn in this? He talked about this on the reunion. He learned to slow it down. He learned to slow it down, to do the slow burn, to be very intentional before introducing his son to a partner. And that was his regret, that he had introduced his son to Meg. That was a vulnerable part of his life. And he let her in. And I think that Jordan probably felt sad and regretful about bringing somebody into his son's life and then having that person no longer be in his son's life. So there was so much learning here for Jordan. And I think, once again, I think this probably taught him, trust your gut. When you think you're not compatible with somebody and you know in your bones that you're not, it's okay to just own that, no matter what they're saying. So lots of learning from Jordan and Meg. I want to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, Dr. Morgan Coaching. What did you think of Jordan and Meg? And are you happy for Meg? I mean, she seems super happy. She's got a baby. She's got a whole new man. They seem very content. Where are you at on this couple and how it all played out? And I will say, if anything, Jordan got a heck of a bromance out of this. It seems like him and Joe are buddies. I will say, I think like Joe probably, it like maybe reminds Jordan of like some of his avoidantly attached tendencies that maybe he had in the past. I don't know. Like I could see hanging out with Joe as this like escape of like, hey, let's just go have fun and drink and like, you know, just do bro stuff. Like I don't know that Joe is the best influence on Jordan, but time will tell. They have a very cute bromance, okay? Let's move on. Let's move on. Speaking of Joe, we're going to talk about Joe and Madison. Oh, we got to talk about Joe and Madison. This is for any of you that have been in the relationship where you feel like you're going crazy because you are with someone who is at least 50% securely attached, but then has their avoidantly attached side as well. That's what we saw with Joe. Lots of good traits, lots of opening up. There's moments where you're going, oh, he's sharing how he's feeling. And even moments where he's trying to share how he's feeling. And then we're seeing that Madison's emotional dysregulation is taking up too much space and he can't quite get it out. So this is that dynamic where you've got the person who is 50% at least secure, but then has that avoidant attachment side. And then you've got the other partner who also has secure attachment, but then has that quote unquote secret anxiously attached side. You guys know what I'm talking about, okay? Where you are doing your best to show up securely attached, but then that anxious attachment comes out when you're stressed, when there's a really intense moment, when you're needing that reassurance. You're needing reassurance and you're not getting it. And then that anxious spiral side comes out. We saw this dynamic play out in Joe and Madison. And I want to throw it out there. I think the pressure of filming a reality TV show, I don't even know everything that goes into this, but I can only imagine. I mean, this obviously is a lot on the people who go through it. I think that we got to see probably the more anxiously attached and avoidantly attached sides of Joe and Madison because of the environment, because of the intensity, because of the stress. So, what on earth is going on with this couple? So, we have the clear example of Joe having these avoidant, dismissive moments. Okay. And he's using alcohol and he's using humor. And my goodness, I have to acknowledge, he reminds me of so many guys I dated in the past. And if you're listening to this, he might remind you of people you've dated. They're charming, they're good looking, they're using the humor. But then when you really need them, when you're having that moment of, oh, are we in this for real? Maybe you're trying to define the relationship, they're not showing up, right? And I think with Madison, being the anxious attacher, we saw her preoccupied self come out. We saw the emotional dysregulation. And I honestly know this, that she probably could show up more securely attached, probably majority securely attached in a different relationship with somebody who was secure. It would help mirror her secure self, and we would have seen more secure attachment. They were like fire and gasoline, these two. This is like all those sad country songs about how, you like the whiskey and you know it's bad for you, but you drink it anyways. Like, I don't know. This is that relationship dynamic that is just painful and it just doesn't work. And we saw it again and again and again. And I will say, obviously, the drinking in this season, we got to see how it related to distancing strategies in relationships, to numbing strategies, right? I think, they're all out at the party. I think this was when they were meeting each other for the first time. Yes. And Joe's getting wasted. And so were some of the other guys, but Joe's getting totally wasted. I can imagine this. It's super overwhelming to meet the other cast members. It's super overwhelming to be, okay, introducing, here's my partner when you're not even fully secure in your relationship yet. He's worried about how he's being seen. And I loved this depiction that we got to see with Joe, because this is true. I think people think, oh, avoidantly attached people are just like cold and collected. We got to see how the anxiety played into avoidant attachment, right? This is somebody who actually shows up with quite a bit of overthinking. He's overthinking quite a bit. And I'm laughing because I know what this is like. I mean, I've been that person too. I've dated so many of this type of person where you're just like, oh my gosh, can you get out of your head for 2 seconds? And instead of it manifesting as anxious attachment, he manages his overthinking by shutting down emotionally. Okay. So instead of like spiraling and, going into all the scenarios, I'm sure he does a bit of that, but he's also trying to not feel his feelings, to distance himself from whatever's going on, and to just shut down. He's trying to shut down. And that's where the alcohol comes in, right? I think Joe and Madison, again, the body comments. The body comments were hard. The body comments were hard. We see Joe kind of making jokes about this at the reunion. He talked about how, of course, he found Madison attractive and all they did was have sex. And, he's kind of overcompensating. If you didn't watch Love is Blind, we got to see that in real time when Joe meets Madison and then he's talking to producers in the little sidebar conversations. We get to see him say things like, well, she's not my type. I usually date, does he say skinnier, thinner, smaller? He uses a word that's not great, and then he's trained by the time the reunion comes around, and I think he says petite. But basically, we get the sense that Madison being in a curvier body, and she's gorgeous, by the way, but her being in a curvier body, that was not his type. And once again, this can be something that avoidantly attached people do. There's this desire to distance and to distance at any cost, and there's a rigidity in trying to control, and having a super rigid type can help you try to control, right? So I think, when we see them have their reveal, as they do in Love is Blind, they're walking down and they first see each other, it's all over Joe's body language. He doesn't know how to process this. This isn't his type, right? And I think more than it being actually body shaming, he's a terrible guy, more than it being that, I think we finally got to see the connection between avoidant attachment style and rigidity on a type. Okay. But Madison, of course, with anxious attachment, what do you do with anxious attachment? You devalue yourself already. You're looking to be chosen. You want someone to say that you're good enough, right? So Madison taking his rejection of her and then later watching it back, I think it'd be really easy to see how that did a lot of emotional damage to her and that made her question her own worthiness. I saw on some interviews she talked about developing an eating disorder for a temporary time. Like, this is so sad to me. That is Joe's obvious stuff that he has to work through that has nothing to do with Madison's worthiness. And so many of you go through this where you take your quote unquote rejection as meaning something about you when it's really just something that the other person's working through. Okay. So, my hope for Madison is that she's growing through this, she's choosing herself, and that she learns that, okay, I need to learn how to self soothe. I need to learn how to move myself back to a securely attached place, and that she is dating someone who wants to show up for her. She needs that really securely attached, emotionally available person who wants to show up and give her the reassurance that she needs and that she deserves, right? That's my hope for Madison. And then for Joe, my goodness, I mean, he's turned this all into humor, classic avoid strategy. If you go look at his Instagram, it's like, you know, him reading the hate comments about himself and like drinking more as he's reading these hate comments. And okay, dude, yep, it's funny, like way to own it. And also, please go to therapy. Please go work on yourself. Work on adding more secure attachment. I think he already has some, but let's make you more comfortable with difficult conversations, more comfortable with negative emotions, more comfortable with sharing your truth. Because here's the deal. Honestly, I think Joe could have communicated earlier that Madison was not the person for him, and then there would have been just so much pain that was avoided. And then, dude, why did you date Casey? That's all I'm going to say about that. But the Joe controversy around, he then I think had a short thing with Casey, who was the girl that Patrick had matched with. And honestly, there's a lot that could be said there, but these are two people who are using rigid types and physical appearance as part of their coping, and then they found each other. Very interesting. Um, and then I don't know the tea on Joe's latest relationship. I'm sure some of you have been like going down the rabbit hole and finding this all out. But my hope is that he could create a secure, loving partnership, particularly by just working on owning his emotions and expressing himself more directly. And Madison, I'm not worried about Madison. She's going to be just fine. She is going to be better than fine. She's going to be one of those like Love is Blind girls who, you're like, oh yeah, she dated that one guy. And then she just moves on and, gets to build a beautiful relationship with someone. And I didn't even talk about this, but amazing that she was so vulnerable about her eye condition. And oh my gosh, the casting people, y'all with finding the person that has an eye condition, and the show is called Love is Blind. I mean, it matches up. I could see why that worked for you. But I just want to say, like, all jokes aside, Madison owning her health condition and sharing it was a beautiful example of, hey, when we're dating and we have stuff that we're scared to share, when it's the right person, and Joe did handle this part well. This is why I say, like, he did have some emotional availability, some secure attachment. When it's the right person, they are going to be curious about it. They're going to want to support us. And it's not going to deter from them being attracted to us, right? It's just something that they're like, yep, I get it. That's part of who you are. And we will work on this together, you know? I think more people could learn from that. Of you have to just be open about who you are and the things you're dealing with, and realize you're not alone, and the person you're dating has their own stuff too, right? Whether it's an eye condition, a mental health condition, whatever it is, whatever. Maybe you have a major predisposition for diabetes or heart issues in your family, or you have, high probability of developing cancer based on cancer in your family. I mean, all of us have things, and the sooner that we're open about it and we share our humanity and we're authentic, then it lets the other person do the same. And then, God forbid, if somebody was to say, like, oh, well, that's not for me and I don't want to be with you because of that, then you have to say, thank you, God and universe, that I know this about this person and that I learned this early on, because then I'm not meant to be with this person. That's not my person, right? If they don't want to meet me in the reality of my imperfections and the authenticity of who I am, if they're not going to do that, they're not my person. So the sooner you can trust yourself to open up and show up authentically, the sooner you're going to know, is this the relationship for you? So I could go on and on about Joe and Madison, but that was a great example on reality TV of real world. This is what secure/avoidant guy, like, that's a pretty really common experience of how they show up. And then the secure/anxious that we got to see with Madison. It's time to move on. Okay, I could go on and on about Joe and Madison. We are moving on. We're talking about Nick and Annie. I have to be real with y'all. When I was watching the reunion and it got to Nick talking, my husband was there. My husband Robert. We're like in bed. I've got my face mask on. We got the whitening strips. We had the whole 10-step night routine, and I'm zened out. I'm enjoying the reunion. And then Nick starts talking, and I said to my husband, I have to turn this off. I can't. And I can tell you why, because my BS meter is going off. Okay. I uh I even, on an earlier episode when I talked about Nick, I said to you guys, look, he has perfectionism. He's, there's ways he could grow, he could get better, there's ways he's secure. But then it just really rubbed me the wrong way how he showed up at the reunion. I felt like he had totally scripted. Like, did he hire someone to help him prepare what to say? Because this man just came off really inauthentic, over apologizing, trying to list all the things he did wrong before anybody could say them. There is obviously extreme ownership, extreme accountability. I love those things. However, let's make it authentic, not rehearsed. Okay. It felt very rehearsed to me. And maybe some of you disagree. There could be some Nick fans out there. I was really turned off by it. And once I've said this before, I think Nick has a lot of anxiety, perfectionism, and some anxious attachment that he's struggling with. So I think it's really preventing him from showing up authentically. So, let me go back a little bit. So yeah, there was the love triangle. There was Nick, Annie, and Kate. Okay. Kate was in this love triangle. And we saw Nick go from Kate being his number one to then him aligning with Annie. And then Annie was in another relationship that she couldn't quite get there with. And she went for Nick. So basically they both kind of left their number ones and then ended up in a relationship together. Nick and Annie in the pods is the perfect example of what happens in a long distance relationship. I really believe this. I feel like they both were showing up with this rose-colored glasses, imagining the fantasy. They're showing up and they're dreaming this life together. Where was the realness? Where was the vulnerability about the fears and the stresses? And, I didn't see it. It felt like The Truman Show, is that what the heck? The Pleasantville? You guys remember this? The old movie? It felt like fake. It just felt fake to me, okay? So Nick and Annie, though, we basically see that Nick gets in the real world and he's with Annie, and Nick's wanting to take it slow, right? Maybe he can feel some of Annie's anxious attachment coming out, and it's causing him to then lean towards some anxiety, lean towards some avoidant attachment. Once again, we have a lot of perfectionism going on. But then Annie is getting triggered, and she's showing up with more and more anxious attachment and then even avoidant attachment. And Annie is someone that I can say for sure I believe, well, I can never say for sure. I'm not, I don't know these people personally. I'm not interviewing them. If I had to hypothesize, I would say that Annie would be the most likely to have a disorganized attachment style, meaning she has both anxious and avoidant attachment strategies. Okay. So she's love bombing. They're both were. They're all in and they're naming their kids and da 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 da, right? Okay. And then all of a sudden, when Nick isn't giving her the response she wants, when he's not validating her, she shuts it off. And in their breakup scene, Nick is like breaking up with her. And what is happening? Annie's on her phone. She's, pulling the okay, I'm done with you move, which is classic disorganized attachment. Like, okay, we're done. I'm gonna just show you how little you meant to me. And she's on her phone, right? So I just think that this was another attachment style dynamic that we got to see where these are two people who had created this fantasy. And in the beginning, everything seemed great, but then the fantasy crumbles. The fantasy crumbles as the true attachment styles come out. And we got to see how it just didn't work. And when Annie's going through that breakup, I know she probably went through so many emotions. And one of the ones I imagine she went through the most was anger because she let that wounded part of herself, the part of herself that doesn't usually open up to people, she let herself open up. She let herself trust Nick. And then I think the thing she's telling herself is that he betrayed me. It wasn't accurate, right? And these are those, and I don't know this for sure. Can I just clarify that? I'm not her therapist. I don't know this for sure. But having been through similar things, I think Annie's thinking to herself, oh my God, why did I let this guy in? Everything seemed perfect. And then it wasn't. How could I let myself trust him? And then here's the real core emotion. She's beating herself up. She's saying, why didn't I know better? I should have done better. I should have known. And Annie's self trust, her trusting herself to make good relationship decisions, then is at an all-time low as this relationship is ending. That is really what I think happened here. And then Nick, once again, had to turn off the reunion. I really want him to work on owning his shit. I want him to work on, hey, I can do things that are wrong. And yes, I can take ownership, but I don't have to take ownership in a way that is over apologizing, inauthentic, and literally repels people from you. You know, I really think there's so much growth there for him, and he can be a great partner. I think he has so many good things as a foundation. It's just all about letting go of the BS beliefs that have made him feel like he has to be perfect in order to be loved. Like at the core of it, he needs to realize that he is enough already and that people are going to be so much more drawn to him if he's just authentic about who he really is. He's going to become a much better partner. And then for Annie, my goodness, Annie needs to really work on emotional regulation, learning how to embody secure attachment, and taking it slow. She needs to work on pacing her emotional investment, gathering the data, making sure that a relationship feels secure before throwing all of her energy into a relationship. and obviously working on not creating a fantasy. Because once again, we saw that they co-created this fantasy relationship together that in real life did not exist. So I hope that that breakdown matched up with you guys. Obviously, send me a DM if you have anything you would add, any questions, or if you disagree with me. Maybe you thought Nick and Annie were a great couple. I don't know. Shoot me a DM at DR Morgan Coaching. I want to hear from you. Okay, we have talked about all of the couples and the attachment style dynamics, and now I want to leave you with what are the lessons? What are the takeaways? Okay, we're going to go back through each couple and talk about the core takeaways. So we started out with Jordan and Meg. Here's the deal. You can love someone and still not have compatibility or capacity. I think once again with Jordan and Meg, we saw there was love there. They had created secure attachment, but there wasn't really compatibility when it came down to it, right? Maybe there was for Jordan. He was willing to accept Meg as she was. But when Meg was honest with herself, the secure attachment wasn't enough. Yes, she wanted secure attachment, but she also wanted somebody who matched her lifestyle. That was a core need for her. So, securely attached people get to date with compatibility in mind. Okay. And they know when to walk away and they can do so with compassion. One thing I will add, they were mature. There was a classiness to how they handled their breakup. Their interactions at the reunion seemed like there was boundaries there. They were not, overly close, which is good because she has a whole new family that she's created, right? But they handled their breakup well, and you could tell there was mutual respect, even if there had been hurt. I don't think there is ill will towards one another. So I think that was another takeaway. Okay, what can we take away from Joe and Madison? The anxious avoidant dynamic that when you are even mostly secure, but then you have that little bit of unhealed anxious or avoidant, it's going to come out in that kind of dynamic. And I think that we learned that connection and communication and creating secure attachment is absolutely necessary as the foundation. All right. And then the other takeaway, you guys know I talked about this, that when someone is quote unquote rejecting us, make sure that you're not internalizing it to mean anything about you. It's not about your worth, right? It can be so much more about whatever they are doing to have protection in terms of emotional distancing, right? And in this case, we saw the body image stuff that Madison was going through and how she internalized that when in reality, that could be a lot more about Joe's kind of rigid type that he has created based on his own need to try to control his dating life. Okay. So, just an example of how if somebody's rejecting us and we're seeing something they're saying about us, that maybe it actually has nothing to do with us and everything to do with them. Okay. So another couple, this was the final couple we talked about, Nick and Annie. What is the takeaway? Love bombing, fantasy relationships do not last. Okay. It is not a sustainable connection. Secure love is not about fireworks. It is about steady, consistent emotional investment. I will say this. I think we also learned from Nick and Annie. Here's a bonus. People invest at different speeds. We saw Annie going all in. And what did that do? It made Nick go slower and slower and even retreat. If Annie had been able to get herself to secure, she might have been able to accept the pace at which Nick was investing. So sometimes, I always use the pool metaphor. Sometimes your partner is dipping their foot in the pool when you're actually already both feet in and you're walking in. Sometimes you're in the deep end in the 9 feet of the pool and your partner's over at the 6 feet. You have to realize that people invest at different speeds. And in a healthy relationship, we're not trying to control the speed at which our partner emotionally invests. We're checking in with ourselves and seeing, oh, can I create secure attachment with this? Do I need more reassurance? Just because this person isn't moving as quickly as me, am I able to meet them where they're at and allow us to invest at different speeds, right? We saw that Nick's pace of it being slower, that really, really triggered Annie. So there's so much to learn from these couples. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but I'm going to say it now. This was brave of these people. This was super brave. And I'm sending them so much love, and no one is perfect. I really truly hope that instead of judging or, sending any hate, that we can see parts of ourselves in them and that we can realize that, you know what, everybody needs to work on this stuff. We're not taught how to have healthy, secure relationships. Shouldn't that be a class? Like, that would have been so much better than trigonometry, okay? We need to be taught these things, and we're just not. We're just not. So we're all trying to figure it out together. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. I love putting these together for you. They are so much fun. I will be wrapping up on Wednesday. We'll be talking about the remaining couples. It's going to be so good. I know you're going to learn so much. And of course, if you are ready to do the work, do not forget applications are closing. I would love to help you. Let's get you to a securely attached place so that you can enjoy your dating life and finally have that relationship that you've always wanted. It's actually so much easier than you think. Once you do the work of, okay, letting go of past relational trauma, rewiring your brain with secure, loving, empowering beliefs, learning how to embody secure attachment in your nervous system, creating that securely attached identity. Once you follow this framework, then your dating life gets to be enjoyable. It gets to be so much easier. And you get to bring in that person that you can actually build a secure, loving relationship with. And I've helped thousands of people do this at this point. So this is a proven framework. It has worked for myself, obviously, but so many of my incredible clients. And I just want you to know it'll work for you too. What are you waiting for? Let's make 2026 your securely attached year. You are so deserving of this. So deserving. Okay. Go use the link in the show notes to apply. And of course, as always, you guys know this, I am wishing you high self worth and great relationships. I'll talk to you soon.